Vijay, you're audible to us.
Yeah. So it is my pleasure to invite Mr. John Gloster, who is currently the Chief Quality and Performance Officer, Board Advisor for Sports Village India. He's also the Head of Sports Science and Medicine, Go Sports Foundation India. He is currently the Head Physiotherapist and Medical Coordinator for Rajasthan Royals, IPL, which is an IPL team. He is also the ex-Head Physiotherapist, Indian Cricket Team, and as well as he has also been the head physiotherapist for Bangladesh cricket team and Surrey County cricket team. So it's a long introduction. I would take a minute to introduce him further in detail so that the audience can get a much larger picture about Mr. John. Mr. John is an Australian sports physiotherapist of 27 years experience working with elite athletes, international sports team, as well as the general sporting population. Has worked extensively with international cricket for last 22 years, most notably as physiotherapist to the Indian cricket team from 2004 to 2008, where the Indian team was at peak. Surrey County Cricket in England, which is the year between 1998 to 2001, and also for Bangladesh national cricket team from 2001 to 4. And you mean the very famous IPL team Rajasthan Royals. He has been with Rajasthan Royals since its inception in 2008. Recently, John has also covered the Pakistan Super League, Masters Champions League, and the T10 International League in the UAE as head physiotherapist. John has been based in India for last 15 years and has been able to render all these services to our sporting fraternity. John has been involved in over 60 international cricket tour series as head physiotherapist, which is very big. Having completed his undergraduate studies in Australia in 1992, he had many years of private practice experience both in Australia and UK, including stints with Australian Institute of Sport and other national and international sporting teams during that period. John has also lectured and tutored at university undergraduate level in orthopedics and sports-related injuries, and is currently widely sought as a consultant on many health, fitness, and injury-related topics. His intimacy with the cricketing world has also allowed him to consult in a variety of areas ranging from stadium design to anti-doping policies and tournament logistics. Mr. John is often seen on numerous TV shows in India for expert comments on sporting, health, lifestyle, and injury-related topics, both in the sporting as well as the general population. John has developed a special interest in the sports education space and the growth of Indian sports ecosystem from the ground up, primarily through his executive and board advisory role with Q Sports. And some more points, he sits actively on 3 advisory boards for school and health-related projects in Mumbai and across India, which is a very key point we have to note. John currently is head of sports science, medicine, and board advisor for the Go Sports India. I once again like to welcome Mr. John Gloster on behalf of Foundation. Thank you, Mr. John, for taking your time and participating in this webinar. We have a lot of our NGO fraternities registered for this webinar, and we have students also. Even there are a lot of budding women cricketers from the schools have joined this webinar to have an interaction with you. Thank you, John. Thank you so much.
Fantastic, and thank you very much for the introduction. Sorry about the long-winded introduction, but I've squeezed a fair bit in, as you can see, over the last 27 years of my life as an elite sports physio. But 15 of those years been here in India, and 19 of those years been in the subcontinent. So I'm very familiar with the whole operation of the subcontinent sporting ecosystem. And that's also right from the top in terms of the elite level sport, but also right down to where it really matters, which is the grassroots and particularly the sports education system in this country. So I'm very enthusiastic about the future of Indian sport, and I'm very enthusiastic about the foothold and hopefully soon a stronghold in the sports education and physical education space as well, because I believe that's where all champions are made. Through a robust sports education system. And I believe that we need to ensure that the maintenance of that system moves forward strongly. So what I'll be talking about today is I'll just share my screen with you. So I'm hoping you can all see my screen. So what I want to talk to you a little bit about today is sort of my life and my world, and a little bit about, at the end, about, you know, what I've learned from being involved in some of the best dressing rooms in the world. Like I said, you know, 22 years with international cricket has allowed me to sort of find my way, so to speak. There's been a lot of trial and error in there as well. But I've also learned some really valuable lessons from some really incredible people. And that's the beauty of being in a good dressing room and being in a good team, is that you learn and you're constantly learning. So what I'm trying to do is pass on some of those learnings. I'll give you a little bit of an idea first about my world as it is at the moment in the current dressing room that I'm in, which is the Rajasthan Royals dressing room, which has been successful. It's had its ups and downs, but there's also been some amazing people who've passed through that dressing room as well. So it'll be a little bit about what I do in the team. And then there'll be some little bits and pieces and some take-home messages towards the end of the talk as well, which I think and hope are of value to all of you. But, you know, once again, it's a pleasure to be here. I love imparting knowledge, and, you know, sadly, this is the platform we have to do it on at the moment. So often there's technical issues, but bear with us if there are. But, you know, at least we're finding ways now to communicate with each other and to learn, and use this opportunity during lockdown to start learning about other aspects of our lives. Much of, you know, what I'm talking about is obviously relative to the India context, but with a bit of an international flavor put into it. Let me just start my slideshow. I'm gonna have to go this way. Okay. So injury prevention. I mean, primarily that's what my main role is at the moment, but we're going to look at in Major League Baseball, and I put that up there, we now term injury prevention almost as Moneyball 2.0, with the belief that staying healthy is the #1 predictor of success. Okay, and with good reason too, because, you know, last year injury costs topped $1 billion in the Major League Baseball season. So it's really important that we keep players, we keep our athletes performing and on the park. So that primarily is what, you know, my job is. The latest UEFA studies, you know, show that teams that have fewer injuries are the ones that ultimately perform better in the domestic leagues as well as in the Champions League. And the same goes for IPL. The most successful teams are the ones that are consistently able to put a fit, healthy group of individuals onto the park week in, week out. So I love this little bit at the bottom, is that, you know, wellness is the gateway to performance, and that, I believe, the absolute platform for success. And that is entirely relevant today also in the context of COVID-19, is that wellness has now come to the fore. Immunity, wellness, health, exercise, all these things that we see as critical in our athletes' day-to-day life for performance, we're now seeing as critical for our own health and well-being, particularly during COVID-19. So it's now suddenly becoming all very relevant to us. So you got to remember that, you know, this is big business. Sport is big business. You know, the IPL, as you know, it's one of the biggest sporting leagues in the world now. It's a $7 billion, 50,000 crore league. Big money is paid for big players. We paid, you know, 12 crores for 2 players of ours, 15.5 crores for Pat Cummins to KKR this year. So it's a bit like assets, having assets. And the players are effectively our assets. They're being bought and sold, traded on an open market like commodities on your stock exchanges. So now the franchise responsibility is to see that we can get a return on those assets. So who, because we've invested heavily in them, we need a return. So who are the people that are most responsible to manage those assets to ensure that we get a return on the asset? So it poses the question, who are now the most important people in the modern sports dressing room? Okay, so who's the most important person now, possibly in your team? You know, in football, particularly in the team sports, football, cricket, you know, AFL and Australia rugby, it used to be thought that it's the coach or the manager, because ultimately they're the ones that set the strategy and put the players onto the field. But now that we're becoming more and more fitness orientated with sport in all codes, you'd have to argue that it's now the physiotherapist and his S&C team and his medical team that are probably the most important people now in the modern dressing room, because they determine ultimately who plays, who doesn't play, how durable they are, how fit they are, how injury resistant they are, and also how happy they are, and also how connected to the team they are. They're all very critical points now in the modern dressing room. So myself and my team around me are the ones who are now sort of termed the risk mitigators. We're the investors' risk mitigators. So the franchise owner looks to us to mitigate the risk of injury, to ensure that every player is available to play for them on the field for that particular game. So my job is to put strategies in place to mitigate that risk. And as you know, the coach, he can be the best coach in the world and he can have the best plans in the world. But if the players are not physically prepared enough to implement those strategies, then they all go out the window, particularly in sports like football, where they're so strategy driven and fitness driven. So the coach will have a certain set of plans that he wants implemented on the field, but fitness determines whether they are implemented by that player or not, or that group of players or not. So it's a bit like in business strategy, we all have what we call expectation mismatches, and that's one of the biggest contributors to failure. And it's very similar in the sporting space, where the coach has an expectation at one level of an individual or a team based on the fitness, but in the case, they're unable to implement their strategy because it's not fulfilled by the player or the playing group. We've got to always keep that in mind. And I've always said it, that the player is of no use to anybody if they're sitting on the physio couch or in the medical room. So therefore, we're now deemed to be the asset managers. So the physios, F&C, the support staff are now deemed to be the asset managers. And that's not just for the 6 weeks of the tournament that we're all involved in, but it's actually all year round, because we need to manage those assets in order to manage the relationships with those people continually throughout the year. And it's important that we have those strong relationships and associations with them. And it's exactly how you would do in the business world as well, maintaining relationships throughout the year to ensure you get the best out of those people. So I also see myself and my team then also as what we call relationship builders or relationship managers, because it's really important to build healthy relationships in any team. And that can be in your teams, in work teams, sports teams, any environment. In order to get the best out of them, you have to have a relationship with them, and a really healthy relationship. So I've always said that in the sporting world, the best relationship builder is through an athlete, in this case, the cricketer, knowing that someone is trustworthy there around them all year, okay, particularly when they need them, which is when they're injured, because that's when they're most at fear, okay? So if you can overcome that fear for them, give them a proper treatment delivery throughout the year, and they know that they have someone to turn to at those cases, it's incredible how strong a relationship builder that is. So just being available, and the same in the corporate world, okay? If there's someone backing you and you know that there's someone that you're confident in around you throughout the year, then you will always have a healthier relationship and therefore a better business outcome as well. So for us as a team at Rajasthan, it's really about showing an extended duty of care, which is the word that we use, above and beyond the players' expectations. And that can be things like running all their blood tests for them. That can be things like monitoring all their nutrition choices, mental health strategies, educating them in the world beyond cricket, and all these other strategies that we have in place. They're relationship builders, because that's what the athlete wants, and that's what they're missing out on often. And we look to be providing that. We also look to be a knowledge provider. There's a lot of fear of not knowing or understanding if they are injured or there's an illness. So that's my job, is to ensure that they overcome those fears by educating them appropriately. So I'm exposing them to the latest and best practices in all our respective fields. And that can be also outside of my medical realm. It can also be in the management, in systems and processes that surround the team, structure, technology, like I said before, health, media relations, their own brand and how to build them. All these other things are what we call relationship builders, and we all within our team control some aspect of that, which is extremely valuable in the athlete's eyes particularly. So some of the examples that we've built at Rajasthan, to try and sort of reduce injury rates, keep our assets on the field, keep them performing, and particularly in the area of sports and sports science and sports medicine, which is my world. And not only are we protecting our assets, but we're also maintaining that relationship and confidence that we talked about before. Nutrition is a big one, and that's number one. And I'm very particular about that. We know that inflammation is an athlete's worst enemy. So therefore, everything we work at is reducing inflammation in their system. Nutrition is also the foundation of cognitive health, well-being, long-term health outcomes, particularly when we look at resilience in the athlete. These are all important parts of nutrition that we keep right at the fore. So that's one. I talked earlier about blood markers, and I'm very particular about, until you know an athlete from the inside out, then it's very difficult to treat them. So knowing their blood markers, understanding all about their specific blood markers that determine their long-term health outcomes. We're really staggered to find last year when we tested, and this is not just the cricketing cohort, but my complete athlete cohort across India, that 30% of the athletes in this country are pre-diabetic. So these are your highly trained, the best physical people in the world, in the country, and the majority of, well, a large percentage of them are actually pre-diabetic and didn't know it. So that goes to show that we have a larger problem in the general population who are sedentary and have poorer health habits than perhaps our best athletes. So we need to look at the big picture here. And that's why some of these learnings that I take from this dressing room are taken into the greater world and into my school world as well, around educating on these things. So blood markers is a big one. Recovery strategies, I think we have some of the best in the world, certainly the best in the league and some of the best in the world, from my knowledge. We use lots of aids, game ready machines, recovery pump machines, big education policies on sleep. Sleep is the best medicine, I believe. Travel, we have, masseurs. The other people that we employ in the group are all international sports scientists, all people with international qualifications. So we surround the players with a network and an ecosystem of the highest quality. This is probably, of all the strategies and implementations that we've put in place over the last few years at Rajasthan Royals, it's probably the geographical positioning system, the GPS catapult system that we use there, because it has suddenly given me an enormous amount of information about those individuals and about the cricketer, which, like I said before, the more information I have about somebody, the more I'm able to help them. And this is a wonderful relationship builder as well. So we look at some of the things that we're looking at when we use some of the data that we collect when we use this piece of equipment, but it's completely the way that we've trained for cricket. It's revolutionized certainly all our training protocols. It's revolutionized our recovery and nutrition platform. And all of this data has allowed us to better clarify the physical parameters of our sport and for our athletes. So like I said, I now know maximum speeds that they attain in kilometers an hour, total distances covered in meters across an entire match, how much time in seconds and also in distance in meters they actually spend in certain speed bands. And I've given some examples there, from 15 to 20, right through to 30 kilometers an hour. How long do they actually spend running at those speeds in time and distance? Average speed for the match, bowlers run up speeds in meters per second, body loads at delivery. All these are critical pieces of information that then tell me how I need to train them in order for them to be prepared for match fit, to be match fit. So this is critical data. So this has become one of the most important tools, I believe, and we use that year in, year out now. So data has now become probably my best friend, whether we like it or not. So not only are we asset managers, like I talked about, we're also now data monitors at the same time. Because it's this data that allows me to know every player and every individual in that squad better than I've ever known them before, and therefore I can help them so much more. And once again, I say, the more I help them, the less they spend on that physio table. So they're of more value to us and the franchise. So again, just summarize, Nick Davies is a wonderful sports scientist from the EPL world in the UK. It's our role to provide a physical platform for these players to be able to express themselves on a match day. And primarily, that's what we are. We're asset managers who implement risk mitigation strategies. So now, because of all this information the way we build these strategies is based now on fact rather than, fiction or gut feel is what we used to put in, whenever we were building strategies for our players in the past. It was more around just gut feel and history, but now there's raw data and facts around why we do what we do, why do we train the way we train, and how do we continue to help them based on that data for those individuals. We're even using the system, the GPS system, because we now know how much time athletes spend running at certain speeds. Then we also can now build complete nutrition profiles specific to that individual and specific to the sport. So myself and Stephen Jones, who's our head of S&C and the fast bowling coach last year, he and I both wrote this paper last year after this around, what is the modern cricket diet? And it's probably not what you thought it was. So if you ever get a chance, Google that and have a look. But so what I'm saying is we're now able to start building research papers and studies based on the data that we're now collecting from our athletes, which is extremely valuable. And it's a way for us to improve our sport and our athletes. So that was a really interesting piece that came out of that. So, they have to be resilient, they have to be durable, they have to be well nourished, they have to sleep well, they have to be recovering well. So this is all the ways that we protect our players. We don't protect players by wrapping them in cotton wool. We protect players from the rigors of the modern game by giving them strategies and fitness strategies that allow them to compete in that game without getting injured or minimizing the risk of injury. And the GPS has certainly allowed us to do that. It's like in the business world, how do you protect an employee in the business world? You protect them by educating them better, giving them better strategies to survive, making them more durable in the workplace. These are all things that equate to both those worlds, the sporting world as well as to perhaps the business world or otherwise. And I look at it similarly in the school environment. How do we protect our assets, being the kids? Same thing, educating them on best practices, physical education, a robust sports education system in place for the children, not just benefiting them now and their education outcomes now, but also their long-term health outcomes as young adults, which is our responsibility as well in terms of asset management. So what then that leads to is, what are the environments that I think control on-field performance and injury? So there's certainly a way that particular environments that athletes and cricketers, particularly in this world, spend a lot of time in. And I think it's often a critical but often overlooked piece in the performance world. And what I'm about to sort of talk about can be extrapolated to perhaps any work environment, particularly outside of the sports environment. So we talk about environments that matter, and this is my world during an IPL series. So it's basically the hotel on the far left there, and then within the hotel, this would be the team hotel. So this is the team hotel in Jaipur that we used last year. Then within that team hotel, there is a team room which is set aside specifically for us. So that's an escape place for players. So again, we're protecting them almost from the outside world because they don't get a lot of privacy in the outside world. So this is their place, their space, somewhere where they can switch off, be themselves, not have to think about anything else. So this is a really important way of building those relationships that I mentioned by providing these environments that are safe, comfortable, and relaxing for these players outside of their cricket world. So that's that one. If we move to the right, then there's the obvious, move down, sorry, to that bus. Now, often the bus environment, because we've got to get from the hotel to the ground, a lot happens on the bus. And if you've got a really happy, vibrant, excited bus, that does then flow on into the dressing room, which is on the top right there. So there's your dressing room on the top right, and that's critical. I think the dressing room environment is the one that we'll spend a little bit of time on in a bit. Bottom left is the dugout, and again, the dugout is critical to the on-field performance, and then the on-field itself is the one on the bottom right, which is the beautiful Adelaide Oval, which was my home ground for many years, my hometown. So I think that each one of those environments lends to the other. So it starts at the hotel and the team room, being happy and healthy, goes to the bus, which is happy and fun. Then we travel to the ground, and it's a healthy, happy, strong, bonded environment in the dressing room, which then goes to the dugout, and then from the dugout into the ground. So I'll just look now. We'll go to the dressing room itself. Now, the dressing room itself is perhaps the most unique environment. Unless you've been in one at the highest level, it's really quite different. But we know that increased injury rates do occur in poor, or what we call negative dressing room environments. So it's a bit like the workplace environment. There's a wonderful study done by De Silva in 2005 looking at workplace environments, because just to ensure that productivity within the workplace environment stays high, you need to have a happy workplace. So the same thing goes for our dressing room environment. Injury rates go up in unhappy and stressful dressing rooms. So my job is made harder if it's not a happy dressing room. So a lot of effort is put into creating a positive dressing room environment with the top sporting team, because that dressing room environment then increases stress. Stress increases the hormone cortisol, and then that increases risk. Then that influences sleep patterns, poor communication, less avenues for players to express themselves, and then ultimately a poor performance. So that's the same with any workplace. So it becomes critical, but this is my workplace. The dressing room effectively is my workplace. So that's why we need to control it as much as we can. So there's a social support mechanism of a good dressing room, and it's often the key to performance that we overlook. The other is that I talked earlier about the hotel, and that's critical to team success. So even just having all the things that players want, it's like a home away from home, effectively. Good TV channels, SIM cards, good reception, Wi-Fi, food choices that they may want, good rooms, good facilities, gyms, pools, all those sorts of things to try and create a happy, healthy environment for them in the hotel that they want to come back to after every match. And then ultimately it's the dugout. It's the dugout that determines, and often the energy on the field is determined by the dugout. So the players on the field look to the dugout for energy. If it's low, then that will go onto the field. If it's high and positive, then that will be reflected on the field. So we do look at all these environments as key players in the success of the sporting team. So I've always seen, this is a wonderful, the ex-Barcelona, ex-football director of Man City, actually, where he said that, talent will get you into the dressing room. It's how you behave that will determine how long you remain there. And that is so wonderfully put, particularly in these days, in that you can be the best player, but if you're not contributing to the team and that environment that I talked about, then often it will be detrimental to the team, despite your skills may being the best in the world. But integrating those players or finding strategies to get those outsiders back into that happy environment will be beneficial to the overall team success later on. So it's a role of us as management to ensure that all those environments that I talked about are well controlled and positive. And that can come back even to selection. And selection of players is also determined along a lot of these lines, because you can't afford to have somebody who's not playing, so a non-selected player in the dugout, who's they can either be giving negative energy or positive energy. If they're consistently giving negative energy, then that does have an influence on the rest of the group. So we talk about who are the givers and who are the takers in the group. Paddy Upton used to put it beautifully, just to equate it to a bank account. Who's depositing energy and positivity, or who's withdrawing. So let's get people who are consistently depositing into the team bank account is the ones that we want to have in the dressing room and ultimately in that dugout. So Paddy Upton was a wonderful guy that we've worked with for many years around this whole mental conditioning side of the game, and those inputs are particularly valuable. So, and that comes back to the leaders, who you select as your team captain, who you select as the leaders within your school environment, within your work environment, and in this case, in the sports environment. Who do you choose to be your leader? Because leaders create culture, and it's in the culture that they create that drives the behaviors, and then it's the behaviors that ultimately produce the results. So always keep that in mind when you're looking at selection. It's also commonly believed that good teams, the best teams, operate around a set of values that everybody in the team buys into and adheres to. But you've got to understand that when you're building and deciding on what those team values are, we have to be aware of something called attention blindness. And that's where a person or a group can't focus on too much information at once. So therefore, only have a maximum of 3 or 4 values or mantras that the team will then hold and take forward for the season. So for example, it might be, I think Barcelona had their big 3 with humility, hard work, and team first were the 3 that they decided on to be their mantras. And then there's a lovely example of them to maintain humility. They were sponsored by Audi. And so Audi made it compulsory, and the team management made it compulsory that every player could only drive Audis and park them at the ground, so that there wasn't then a competition in the car park around who had the best car or the fastest car or the most expensive car. So that was their way of driving humility from the car park, which then translated itself into the dressing room, and therefore ultimately humility onto the field. So these are some wonderful learnings that we've taken away, and we can look at our own environment as well. So on the back of that, always ask the question, particularly to your set of players, is, what do you want to do better than anyone else in your team? Or what do you want to do better than any other team in the competition? You obviously can't do them all. So therefore, what is it, the one thing that you want to come up with and decide on as a team that you want to be? And again, at Barcelona, they decided that the one outcome they wanted, the one thing they were going to strive for, was to be the team that held possession of the ball more than any other side in the league, because they knew that if statistically the most successful teams are the ones that hold the ball for the majority of time. So if you're going to hold the ball for the majority or greater than 65% of the match, then you will win 93% of the time. So that became their mantra. We'll control the ball, because if we can control the ball and maintain possession more than the opposition, it's a 93% chance that we're going to win. So little things like that, we need to look and start driving and embracing some of these ideas. So our mantra last year at Rajasthan was built around speed. So our values and sort of thing that we wanted to be was the fastest and most durable. And that's because we now understand that speed is the foundation of the modern game. On the back of all that information we collected from our GPS trackers, we now know that we are one of the fastest teams and quickest teams. But the modern game, as you can see, is now built around speed. Okay, particularly the T20 and the T10 versions of the game. So, and then ultimately it's then important that your marketing team are also aware of these mantras, because if your marketing team understands that speed is your mantra for the season, then they will then take that into their marketing campaigns and the messaging that goes out to the wider community around what the team's goals are for that year and why they're playing the way they're playing and why they're training the way they're training. So it's also good to keep your management and your marketing team in the loop as well. So then there's also something that I want to touch on a bit here is sort of missing the red flags. I think communication, data may be the key, and data may be the way forward, to knowing our game better and better, and certainly getting to know my players better and better. But there is a danger here as well. You've got to remember, at the end of the day, on the end of all these numbers, they're still a human being. And getting to know them as a person, I believe, is still the key to success. Now, what I want to do here is I just want to give this a go. I'm going to try and play you a very short video. So I'm just going to hop out of this. I'm just going to stop my screen share. And I'm going to go to another screen share again. And I'm going to see if I can pull up. Just want to see if you guys can all see. Can you see, can you guys all see my screen there?
Yes, John, we can see that. You can see the YouTube page.
Okay, I'm just going to play it's about a minute or so. You don't need the sound, but just watch this little video for a minute. Some of you may have seen this before, but I just want you to watch this. I know this takes up a minute or so, but just very careful to watch the end of this for those who haven't seen it before. So that's 1950 Formula One pit stop. There you go. Okay, so I'll just get out of this, go back to my chat again. Okay, so the reason why I've shared that is because you saw in the first one, you know, a minute or so, there's an opportunity there for the engineer, everybody to have a chat to the driver, and then the second one, you know, 2.5 seconds in and out and gone. So I know that's Formula One, but cricket is rapidly, we're talking about here is technology and how fast things are moving, and how, you know, cricket is and some of the other sports also rapidly heading this way as well, where it's just all data. And we're losing that physical communication and physical connection often. And I think that, you know, discussions around communication are the keys to success in the modern sporting team, and that has to be built. And I think we're losing that key ingredient because of the high-paced, high-tech, you know, high-speed world that we're all now living in, and especially the sporting world. And it's just a reminder that we should never forget to communicate between the coaches, between the staff, between the management, and ultimately between the players. Because if you don't, then the results can be catastrophic. In Formula One, they certainly can. And even in my sporting world, they certainly can. If you miss what we call the red flags, the warning signs, because you don't know how to communicate, or you haven't had time or haven't taken the time to communicate, then you may miss something with that individual. And it could be a psychological red flag, could be a physical red flag, could be anything that will ultimately cause either reduced performance, or in the worst case scenario, injury or something worse. So it's almost, you know, the forgotten art in the modern day, but it's still a crucial component of success at every level and in every team that we all work in. So some of the things that, you know, so that's sort of a bit of my world, and where I'm currently at the moment when I'm with my cricket world and I'm not in the school world. But all of these lessons we can relate to any environment, and some of the lessons that I'm going to talk about now are ones that I think are particularly relevant, especially if we have some younger students in the audience today as well. And I always pass on all these learnings to my younger players when I'm with them. And the first one I want to talk about a little bit is about comfort zones. And I was fortunate enough to be in a conversation with Greg Chappell just a few days ago. And he says, you know, the best players in the world, and I worked with Greg for many years. He's one of the greatest cricketers Australia, next to Sir Donald Bradman, Australia's greatest cricketer, unbelievable record, wonderful human being. I worked with Greg closely for a number of years. But he said a few days ago that the best players in the world are often those that are the best thinkers. And they're also the best that are not afraid to remove themselves from their comfort zones more often than others. They're the best in the world that do that. And COVID-19 has particularly taken all of us out of our comfort zone. But we just have to embrace it. And he talks about embracing that. And it's in this sort of uncomfortable place that real people grow. So he's, you know, none of us are really or particularly good at coming out of our comfort zone. So this is a great learning experience for all of us. So he says, embrace that and use that, you know, where he says, you know, where the magic happens. So by taking yourself out of that comfort zone, you have the opportunity to be better than what you are. Which leads me into the next one that I'm always talking about. And I love this quote. If you're the best in the room, you're in the wrong room. And I was told this by Niccolo Campriani, who's a 3-time Olympic gold medalist. He took the gold off, actually at the same time, mid-early 2000s. Wonderful human being. And he talks about this where, you know, his mum actually told him that. And he said, you've always got to look to improve, but you've also got to be challenging yourself. And he was a guy he was the best in his country. He's Italian, and he had to leave his own country and go to another country to train, because that was the only way he was going to improve, by pitching himself against better opposition and better components. So the same thing here. Unless you take yourself out of your comfort zones and where you're happy, you're never really going to improve. So I think it's a wonderful learning. It's certainly a wonderful learning in this time, because we can use this time to practice exactly this. So always try to be better than, I always say to the young players, always try to be better than the guy next to you by just doing these little things better, what we call the 1%ers. And these are the little things that add up to the big things. So, you know, because technically we're all about the same in our sport. Cricketers are all very good. So what's then going to separate you from everybody else in the room? And it's these little things, being aware of what's going on in your mind, taking yourself out of your comfort zones, the nutrition, the training, all the other little things. Because technically they're all pretty good, the Indian cricketers. Trust me, they're the best technical players in the world. I don't know if any of you are familiar with your Indian Army motto, but it's one that I love, and it's the one that I'm always talking about with my young athletes. The more you sweat in peacetime, the less you bleed in wartime. So that's I think that's a wonderful piece. And that sort of leads on to my motto, which is hard work never killed anyone. But again, to succeed, you have to come out of your comfortable place. You've got to push yourself. You have to work harder now because everybody else is working harder. And talent will only get you so far. So the message here is that talent will only get you so far. This is one of the most intriguing people that I've ever worked with, and one of the most obviously successful people that I've ever worked with as a cricketer, but also one of the smartest people I've ever worked with. And I was fortunate enough to spend, 15 years in and around a dressing room with Shane, particularly when he was captain of Rajasthan Royals. And he talks about never fearing failure. And if you want to reach your full potential, you have to fail. So he talked about always going to the edge and never being afraid of going to the edge. So think of it as a cliff, and going to the edge of that cliff. Until you actually go to the edge and fall off, you never really know where that edge is. So you ultimately never know where your limits lie. So you're always operating sub-maximal until you know where that edge is. And he said it's okay to fall off. It's okay to fail. Okay, and because then you know actually where your boundaries are and where your limits lie. So therefore you're able to grow. So we should all be committed to finding where our edges are, finding where our limits are. But the key to that is you need a good team around you to catch you when you fall off that edge and then throw you back up again to have another go. So he always talked about it's one thing to fail, but you've got to have good people around you to catch you. So that was the beauty of Shane Warne. And I can tell you right now that the success of the Rajasthan Royals in 2008 was built around that mantra of don't fear failure, embrace it, because that's ultimately what's going to bring the best out in you. And some of the players that you guys are all familiar with all grew out of that environment with Shane. So the Jadejas of the world, the Patans of the world, the Watsons, who, you know, all those young players came through under Shane under this mantra. Next one is, you know, never take shortcuts. The distance between winning and losing these days is just so small, and particularly in the shorter forms of the game in cricket. You guys know how much, I mean, people talk about India losing the T20 World Cup by 1 centimetre, you know, with MS Dhoni's run out, perhaps. You know, the World Cup final result in itself this year, last year in the 50 over. So, you know, this is the difference now. So you can't afford to take shortcuts because there are other people around you who are no longer taking those shortcuts. So if you do, I'm sorry, but you're going to end up second best. So durability and resilience, the two things that we work on so much to ensure that you don't take shortcuts, and it is built because you don't take shortcuts. So that's always a wonderful one for young athletes to keep in mind as well. So these messages are no different to anything that we talk to at the elite level, at the academy level, or at the school level. I think the learning here is that these are the consistent messaging across all platforms for all our kids is pretty much the same, and it's the same for all our elite players as well. Rahul, this is a Rahul Dravid, a learning of mine from Rahul Dravid, which I think is wonderful. It's about being smart. You know, it's better to look for water by digging one hole 50 feet deep than 50 holes 1 foot deep. You may have heard that before, but, you know, I first heard that from Rahul, and that stuck with me. And there was a wonderful example last year about being smart and what is a smart selection. And all of you will know Usain Bolt, you know, the fastest runner in the world over 100 meters. And he retired from football last year or the year before, and he decided he wanted to be a footballer. And he's a very good technical footballer, very good footballer. So he trialed he was selected for a team in Australia called the Mariners, but it didn't work. And he actually, you know, he wasn't a very good footballer, because what they bought him for is they bought him because they said, well, he's the fastest guy in the world, so he'll be able to accelerate from everybody and leave everybody for dead and you know, take the ball. What they didn't realize is that they hadn't looked at his numbers properly. And if you look at his numbers, and this is his GPS tracking numbers, over the first 30 meters or so, he's one of the slowest in the world. It's his acceleration from then on. So he was always behind the 8 ball. So he's actually not very quick over 20 meters, and football's not run over 100 meters. Football field, there's no opportunity to run more than about 15 or 20 meters. So that wasn't a very smart choice or selection, okay? Because he never got the opportunity to express his skill, which was speed over a longer distance. So that's just, you know, that's about being smart. But you know, that sort of speed wasn't useful for football, for the football world. Probably the fastest person that I've ever worked with as a cricketer is MS Dhoni. Over 30 meters, he's the fastest player I have ever worked with. He's phenomenal. And then after 30 meters, from 30 meters to about 80 meters, the fastest I've ever worked with was actually Sean Tate, the big Australia's big fast bowler. Unbelievably quick, tall, 6'5", but very, very fast. This is another story, again, involving the great Shane Warne. We call it the get off the bus story. And this happened in 2008 IPL. It's a wonderful little story. It's about team, and it's about success and what breeds success. And we lost our first game in the 2008 tournament. We got thrashed in Delhi in 2008. We came back to Jaipur in the evening, the following evening. Now, straight after the match that we'd lost in the evening, Shane said to the whole team, right, tomorrow morning, everybody has to do a recovery session in the swimming pool. I don't mind what time you do it, but everybody has to do it. It's compulsory. So optional timing, compulsory pool recovery session. So off we went. We got back on that next day. We went to the airport, got on the plane, flew back to Jaipur. We landed about 7 o'clock in the evening in Jaipur. The bus was about 10 kilometers from the airport to the hotel. We got about a kilometer outside of and it's nighttime. And hardly any of us had been to Jaipur before because it was the first tournament, the first year. And he stopped the bus about a kilometer and got up in the front of the bus and said, hands up everybody who didn't do the pool recovery session that I told you to do. And about 4 guys put their hands up, and he said, right, get off the bus. And they said, what do you mean, get off the bus? He said, get off the bus. You chose not to be a team member this morning when I asked you to do the pool recovery session. So therefore, you're choosing not to be a team member now. So he said, get off the bus, and you will now walk to the hotel. It was about 8 kilometers. So walk to the hotel. And he left them there. He left these 4 guys. I think one was Jadeja, one was Patan, one was Cameron Akmal. I can't remember who the 4th one was, but there were 4 guys. And he said, if I hear that any of you have taken a rickshaw or a taxi and you haven't walked, then you'll be on the next flight home. And sure enough, about 3 hours later, they walked into the hotel. And that all of them to this day say it's the best lesson they ever learned. And this was the time that we then didn't lose a match after that and won the tournament. But exactly what Shane was saying was that you can't choose when you want to and when you don't want to be part of the team. You're either all in or you're all out. And that was Shane's way of getting everybody on board, and that he was serious about this whole team concept. So these are little things that, you know, little learnings for me that, you know, understand that if you want to succeed, you don't necessarily have to have the best technical people, but you have to have the best team and the best team environment. And that's what he was choosing to build. And ultimately for me, this is what it's all about. I think it's all about getting to know your neighbours better. And I think the modern day game of IPL cricket, T20 cricket, franchise cricket has allowed us to do that. But it's also allowed the sport be the vehicle that allows you to know your neighbour better. And for me, that's all that matters. And that can be at the school level, community level, state level, international level, whatever it is. We have to use it as a way to improve relationships and relations with everybody. And IPL's done it beautifully. It's led to tolerance and growth, particularly on a personal level. You know, I was in that 2008 dressing room, you know, when we won, and all the different cultures and creeds and religions and nations all coming together and hugging each other. And, you know, so this is the vehicle, this is the opportunity, this is the way for all of us to start learning some of these really basic lessons. And it all starts, I believe, in the school playground. I believe it starts with the PE teacher, and then ultimately onto the sporting field, back into the classroom, and then into life. So, you know, I think that's important, that we all embrace this concept of using our team environments to learn to know our neighbours better, and therefore tolerance. So, okay, so I'll just stop sharing my screen now. Can you hear me?
Yes,
you
yes,
can hear
Mr.
me
John,
again?
we can hear you.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, so I think basically what I was trying to sort of get across there is that team matters, and team matters no matter what environment you're in, and the environment matters as well. And we all control that environment, either as individuals or collectively. So, and that can be in any world. It can be in our school world, our work world, our sporting world. But we all have the opportunity to work on some of these strategies now, because we've got time to do it. We're all locked down. We're all challenging ourselves in different ways. But I think these are all going to be tools that we can then take forward as value into the post-COVID world as well. So this is an opportunity for all of us to learn and grow.
Thank you very much, Mr. John. I'm really feeling unfortunate that this session has not happened live in front of the audience. I don't know how many applauses and questions would have got shooted, because it was very lively and interactive, and particularly there are many students and NGO personnel in this call where sports is something beyond playing. So everybody should understand it is not only about playing, it is a lot about culture, our environment, our fitness. So that message has been conveyed very neatly, because when I was reading through the question, there was a question about Rajasthan Royals team also. In the year 2008, they were treated like they will not even get into the second round or semi-finals. And they won
and we sort of knew that. We sort of, because we read the newspapers, we heard what people were saying. And Shane, for the people that know Shane Warne, know that if you dangle that bait, then he'll take it. You know what I mean? So if people were saying that they're a poor team, he would do even more and more and more to prove them wrong. And that's what Shane was very good at, is proving people wrong. And you used to have another saying where he'd say, just find a way. Let's find a way to prove them wrong. And that example of getting on the bus or getting off the bus in Jaipur and those guys having to find their way back in the middle of the night, you know, walking in an unfamiliar city, none of them have been there before, you know, that was their lesson. But you talk to Yusuf Pathan and these guys today, they still to this day say that Shane was the best thing that ever happened to them. And that, you know, that's where their growth started. And that's where they started thinking about how valuable it is if in a weaker team as such that we're, you know, portrayed to be, if you can get the team together and functioning as a unit, you can beat anybody. Priju, I think you're frozen there. Manu? You're muted, Manu.
Yeah, John.
Oh, yeah. Priju's frozen there, that's all. So I'm not sure if you had another question.
So we've received a lot of questions with John over the chat.
Okay.
So I'll just read out some. Priju, you there?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm there. We have a lot of, sorry, unfortunately the connection went off. So we have a lot of questions, but due to shortage of time, we'll pick up our 5 key questions alone from the members who have joined. So we also run an initiative called Sports for Change, where our children are trained, because we have also started women's cricket in our slums and communities, where our volunteers are getting trained, and even some of the girls have got shortlisted at the under 16 category by the Tamil Nadu Cricket Association. So lots of, and as you rightly said about the culture and environment, has created a lot of change among these kids through our initiatives. So I'll just post a few questions. There was a question asked, how are the players preparing themselves if the matches are played closed doors? How much that impact the players' performance if there is no crowd? Will home and away matches lose significance?
Yeah, I think what the players are saying is that we just want to play. Yes, environment does determine enormous amounts in terms of results and energy on the field. So again, that's where the responsibility is going to come back onto the team themselves to create that environment for each other on the field, because the crowd environment is no longer going to be there. So again, the onus comes back on to the team to help create an internal environment that's positive and without having the crowd positivity there. So it will take away from perhaps things like adrenaline, pressure, you know, so there's some advantages to it as well from a playing perspective, but a lot of the good players get up because of the crowd, particularly the home crowds. And you also feel as though they're a motivating factor in that you're doing it for them. So in Jaipur, we talk about, you know, playing for the home crowd and having a fantastic home record. Well, that's part of that home record and successful record is because of what the crowd gives the players and what environment they create for us as well. So that's really important to understand, that the crowd does determine that. But on the other hand, if it means getting some form of entertainment back to the people, in a safe and controlled manner, then some sport is better than no sport, and some sport without a crowd is certainly better than no sport. But as long as we respect the fact that safety has to be at the fore, then the players are very keen to play, trust me. And then in time, we know that the crowds will eventually come back.
John, we have a question.
Thank you. And there's one more question. It's for you.
I can't hear Priju, he's breaking up. Manu, can you take that question, please?
Experience with sports challenging. Can you hear me, Mr. John?
Yeah, it keeps dropping in and dropping out, breaking up and freezing on your screen. So maybe Manu can, if he has access to the question.
You can.
Manu, can you take over, please?
Yeah, sure, John.
Thanks.
So one of the questions that has come up here is that a lot of young managers are here attending the session, and they have a team to lead, and as a nation, India, we've really idealized Dhoni's leadership style. So if you could just share some of his insights of leadership, John, maybe some learnings we all can take from him.
Yeah, I think MS is wonderful and a wonderful human being. And I think the beauty about MS is that first of all, he's very sensitive, and he's sensitive to an environment. Exactly why I think he's so valuable is he picks up on an environment and the sensitivities around it. He's a good communicator, and he also surrounds himself with people who are willing to go the extra mile with him. So, for example, when we went from 2007, we flew straight from England straight to South Africa for the 2007 World Cup, and a lot of the senior players went back to India and didn't play that T20 World Cup, and he was handed the captaincy to then go and take this young team. So most of the team had flown straight to South Africa, and we met with the remainder of the team in South Africa to play that tournament. And that was his first tournament where he said, well, look, guys, this is all about having fun. This is about expressing yourself on the field, but at the same time, remember, let's have fun. And when you have fun, then you're more engaged. If you're having fun and you create that environment, again, within that dressing room that's fun and happy and positive, often the results take care of themselves. Okay, so he was very good at creating that environment. And a lot of my lessons were around creating environments were built from my interactions with MS in those early years, with him as a captain. Understanding that he was still feeling his way as well, because he was relatively junior at that stage. But you always knew from that point on there was something special about him because he was a bit different. He batted differently, he keeps differently, he's unconventional, but he's very, very effective. And that's all that matters. And often if you're a bit unpredictable and you're a bit different, it's so much harder for the opposition to then analyze you and work you out. So that played into his strengths as well. So he just encouraged guys to be themselves. You don't have to look perfect. You don't have, if you get the job done, that's all that matters. And I think that's the beauty of MS is that he's unconventional, but he got the job done and he got people around him to do the job as well by creating the right environment.
Thank you, John. So one more question, John, is that a lot of children aspire to be sports person only and not sports physiotherapist or sports analytic. They do not see right now that as a career option, or that education is not there. So how can India as a nation include some of these aspects into the sports education system?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. And fortunately at the moment, there are good examples of where children have succeeded and become sport, but that's still not the majority. So you still need a backup plan. So that has to be built into the system. So what I mean by that is that it's one thing to pursue a sports direction, but at the same time, complementing that with an education. And more schools are now allowing kids and giving children the opportunity to do both. So they're encouraging their sport because it brings laurels to the school, it brings laurels to the nation, brings respect to that school if they're successful. But at the same time, it also allows that child to stay connected to their education roots and their academic roots. So I think that's critical. The institution takes a hold and a hand in this and encourages sport and sports performance, but also at the same time encouraging those children to maintain their education at the same time. And they can both run parallel with a bit of flexibility from both the institution as well as the individual. So there is a way, and there are lots of kids who've done that. And a lot of your best cricketers in this country have also managed to get very good degrees. Kumar Sangakkara is a lawyer. Anil Kumble is an engineer. You go right through them. A lot of them have done it successfully, and they've gone back to some of those skills that they've learned to be successful in their other lives post cricket as well. So that's really important to think post sport career and what foundations are going to help me with that. So there's some great lessons from those guys, but understand that times are changing, but there's still no substitute for a good, healthy, robust physical education and sports education system in this country. That's an absolute, I think, mandatory play for everybody, because yes, we may get some wonderful sports people out of that at the end, but you're also satisfying and fulfilling other agendas as well for that child. Academic outcomes, we know the relationship between sports people and physically active kids and better academic outcomes. They're going to get your school outcomes. We know the relationship between that and long-term health markers. Okay, so long-term health outcomes are better. social integration, happiness index goes up. You know, so there's all these other things that you would never say just take academics or just take sport. Let's try and put the two together, get them talking to each other. But that has to be encouraged from the institution, and that has to be started at a very young age where it becomes part of that child's life from a much younger age. So again, we're coming back to the whole sports education system in a world now, which I'm so passionate about, because without that, we can't grow the rest of the pyramid, and we can't grow our children into either sporting individuals or healthy, fit, active, cognitively functioning children as they become adults.
Yeah, John. So very rightly said. I think so. I was very fortunate to listen to your talk on the sports education bit with Sai, and it's another. I'm sure you can spend another couple of hours talking on those aspects of the importance of physical education. I think so. In the interest of time, John, we'll just take a couple of questions only.
Sure.
One is from our HCL Foundation teammate Robin, who is a big fan of yours. He asked that you worked very closely with three of the most successful Indian captains in Dhoni, Ganguly, and Kohli. All three you would have very closely worked with. So, what was your experience in, because these are three very different styles of leaderships that they have. So, just a couple of minutes of your experience working with all three, maybe, John.
Yeah, so not so much with Virat, but certainly Saurav, and I did a talk just recently about Saurav and some bits of a book as well, that I think Saurav was one of India's greatest captains. And I say that because he was the one that, he basically took Indian cricket by the collar and said, we've got to do it differently. He gave it a really good shake-up, because at that point in time, if we wanted to compete with the Australias of the world, the South Africans of the world, who were very, I'm not saying overly aggressive, but they had an aggressive nature about them, and they never lay down. So he just said, well, we're not going to lie down either. And we're going to give, if we want to compete, we're technically better than all of them. All we got to do is improve in two areas. One is the mental side of it and the sort of the nature side of it. The other is in our physical. So Saurav was the one who sort of took that whole era of cricket and put it into the modern era of cricket. You know, if you want to say the Australian way or something like that, you can always say that. But basically, he just said, we need to be more aggressive, and we need to set some boundaries that nobody else is going to cross for us. Okay, so he was good. That's why I liked Saurav, and that's why he was responsible for that shift in mindset in Indian cricket and the success that went with it. MS we talked about before, you know, but there were some other wonderful captains that I worked with as well. Rahul Dravid was one. Anil Kumble was another one I worked with. And all of them bring something to the table. And then it's about who was the one that managed to bring it all together. I think if you're looking at the modern day Indian captain who managed to encapsulate everything, it's probably, in my experience, probably MS, because he was able to do that. But interestingly, when I had Rahul as a captain in the Indian team, but then I had him also as a captain at Rajasthan Royals, and I saw a completely different environment and that he operated in the Rajasthan Royals camp, and therefore I saw a very different captain. He was very successful as a captain with us, and he loved the job. And yeah, so I think, again, if you can change the environment, often the individual within that environment can come to the fore as well. And in this case, that being the captain. So it's one thing for the captain to create an environment. It's also another thing for a captain to function in a positive environment as well. And you'll see that the best captains are the ones that create the environment, so they're able to then function so much better and positively as well. So Saurav did it in his way. MS did it in his way. Virat's doing it in his own way, and respect to him. He's brought fitness to the fore. That's a non-negotiable. He's again taken the aggression from Saurav perhaps and taken that to the fore. And look, I don't think there's any coincidence that the fitter, more aggressive Indian team of now is the most successful Indian team perhaps ever. Number one test team, number one ODI team, so everybody has brought something to the table. What we're going to do now is we've set the bar. You've got to continue pushing that bar, because the bar's been set pretty high now by all these guys. from Saurav to Virat to MS to Rahul, etc. to Virat. So the bar's gone up. Who's going to keep pushing that bar up? That's the next question.
That's definitely a very positive sign for the Indian cricket. The bar is kept getting pushed higher and higher. So one last question, John. So we have a coach who's raised this question that if a player never listens to a coach in a practice or in the dressing room, but he is the best player of the team, how do you tackle this situation?
That's where the coach has got to start some one-on-one conversations. If they're that valuable to the team, you've got to weigh up, at what value, where does their value stop being effective for the team? Because everybody can only be so good technically as a player. But if their value there is completely outweighed on the detrimental effect it has on the rest of the team, then they're of no value to that team. They're better off in another team. So, and there's plenty of examples where we have gone to auctions and had the opportunity to buy some seriously talented players, but chosen not to because they didn't fit our core structure, our team ethos, our team mantra. Remember I talked about setting those 3 or 4 sort of key mantras that you build, humility and the Barcelona built around. If they don't fit those categories, because we use those categories in selection. So if they don't fit those categories, what energy will they bring to the dugout? We know what everybody's like now in world cricket. We've seen them, we've worked with them. The hundreds of players that I've worked with over the years because of the different franchise teams. You know what they're like in the dugout. You know what they're like in the hotel. You know what they're like when they're not playing. Okay. And you know what they're like in the dressing room. So that's why I talked about those environments, because if they're not contributing positively to that environment, then there's probably no value having them in that environment. So that, again, you've got to take a hard call sometimes. And we've taken hard calls about dropping very, very good players because they didn't fit the dressing room ethos. Or if you're convinced that they're too good, then they have to see that perspective. And that's where a good coach comes into it. And possibly the relationship they have maybe with the physio or the S&C or somebody else in that team management group, where they can slowly start introducing this concept that there are days that you're going to win it for us. And I think, I just heard the other day in that last answer, they said, there's no I in team, but there is an I in win. And on some days, an individual may have to put their hand up and win it for the team. But that individual can't be the only person every day doing that job at the expense of the environment of the entire group. So then it comes down to the coach, the manager, the physio, those guys to start having individual conversations with that person. Said, if you want a long career in this dressing room, and I talked about that in one of the quotes, it's talent that gets you into the dressing room, but it's your behavior once you're in there that keeps you there. Just remember that.
So thank you so much, John. For all the other questions, maybe for the participants who have not been answered, maybe we'll just send out an email to you, John.
Possibly, yeah, great.
Yeah, if those can be answered there. Thank you so much, John. We have with us the director of HCL Foundation, Nidhi Pundir ma'am. Ma'am, we would like to invite you to say a couple of words.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Hi, John. It's been such a pleasure. This is Nidhi, and thank you so much for being with us and the team and all the young aspirant, participants of our Sports for Change program, which is predominantly a program we run, in order to ensure that children coming from extremely underprivileged situations also have an opportunity to get into mainstream sports. And that's with that idea we have this program, and team has been working quite hard, I know, to kind of get inspiring people, and thank you so much for accepting the invite and being with us.
Thank you. Thanks for coordinating.
And I don't come from the sports, I haven't played much in my life, but I was like hearing you out and everything you said, starting from importance of communication and, the team environment and, the fitness and the larger life ethos. I think they are so important, not only in sports, but in general, to be even in management, and even the foundations like us, and the importance of being a team player. So I'm very, very hopeful that every person who attended the webinar, and more on the YouTube link as they're following, because people somehow love to go on the YouTube link these days.
Good. Very
So
good.
I'm sure they're going to draw a lot of learnings from here. My request to you would be that we have extremely talented and aspiring children coming up through our Sports for Change program. Right now, we're all locked up. They're all kind of trying to keep their fitness levels as good, and HCL Foundation has some online programs for them. But as
Very
and
good.
when we open up, it would be great to kind of, have you as a mentor for them, and help them come up to the mainstream. Some of them have already made to the mainstream, like the women cricket team that Pijo was talking
Yes.
about, and they've really made it hard way. So we'll be in constant touch with you. We'll keep
Please
seeking
do.
your guidance, support. I know you've given us longer than an hour, and
No,
that's
no, it's fine.
we really.
Anytime. My pleasure.
So thank you on behalf of the entire HCL family and HCL Foundation, and most importantly, all the young aspiring players. They look up to you and your mentorship
Thank you.
there. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much. My pleasure, and thanks to HCL Foundation for the wonderful initiative that you have, and we're happy to help and continue to help in any way we can.
Thanks, John, and have a great day. And I hope this lockdown gets over and we are soon out there in
Same.
the field very soon.
Same.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Nidhi. Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, Manu. Thanks for
everyone.
coordinating.